you mentioned two shows again, like Sopranos and Boardwalk Empire. One of the writers for those shows is one of the creators of Tulsa King. It's Terrence Winter. So,
Terry Winter. Yeah, great.
Terry, came aboard with Taylor Sheridan, and now they created this great. It's a new monster. Like I don't think this is not going to not continue. Would knock on wood, because Johnny the Zip needs to come back to work. And that was the great thing about it now, because season 1 went from Paramount Plus to CBS, so we picked up a broader audience. Now season 2 is coming out September 15th.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. We have here today a very special guest. Please welcome Guy Nardulli. Guy, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. How are you?
I can't complain. If I did, nobody would listen anyway.
I'll listen for a half a second.
My friend Tom LaVecchia introduced us, and he said you were about to be a reoccurring character on Tulsa King, which I really, really enjoyed. I wasn't sure how much I was going to enjoy that, because I don't know if you know, but at one point in time, the Gotti film that was done by Travolta, at one point in time, Stallone was in talks to play Gotti early in production. That script went through many rewrites, many redos, directors, people. I mean, from what it was supposed to be a long time ago to what it finally became, it was a massive amount of rewrites and whatever. And I was like, I don't know, because I'm so used to Stallone as like that heavy Italian accent with Rocky. I didn't know how he would come off as, a mob guy. But I got to say, I really enjoyed it, man. And I was really impressed with the whole series.
Yeah, when Tulsa King came out, I did the same thing in 1 second. I was like, all right, well, what has Sly done on the mob, in the mob world? Get Carter, maybe. He did that comedy years ago called Oscar.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, that was more spoofy than it was anything else. So, but it was, the same thing. Like, Sly, amazing actor. I mean, going back to Lords of Flatbush all the way to, his action hero stuff, Expendables, and all that other things that he's done. Dwight Manfredi for him, it was a change. It was a change. Tulsa King was a change for him. And I think he nailed it. It was almost like James Gandolfini kind of going through Sopranos. Yeah. Right? When they made him Tony Soprano, same thing. His career when he started, he was a heavy. He did things. He was playing hitman for the mob. He was, a stuntman in what was the movie? Get Shorty.
Yep.
So, he did things like that. And then all of a sudden he was cast as Tony Soprano. And everybody knows him as Tony Soprano. And I think this shift for Sly gets him out of he's always going to be the action hero. He's always going to be remembered as Rocky. He's going to be remembered as Rambo, Expendables. But this kind of gives him that change I think he wanted when he was doing Copland. I don't know if you remember Copland, where he
I love Copland. He put on a lot of weight for that movie.
He did. He wanted to transform his character and his image, and he did. He did a great job with it. And I think this did this for him here. I think Tulsa King did that for him.
And it's one of those roles, like, I don't know if 20 plus years ago, if it would have went off the same. I think now that he's gotten a little older, and it's almost like he's a little bit more laid back, a little more relaxed in the role, so to speak. I mean, obviously I know that comes with the more movies you do, but it just seems like it fit him now where he's at in his career, as opposed to 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, 20 plus years ago, he was still doing all the crazy action stuff, the stunts and all of that. He was still living in that world. I mean, he looks great now at 76 now, 77?
It's like the way I look now at 40, I wouldn't dare, want somebody to see me in a bathing suit or something. But this dude is jacked to be damn near 80. I mean, just
damn near 80. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, when he did Rocky, the last Rocky Balboa, and he had his shirt off, I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, dude, this guy is he's a machine. He's a machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get into a little bit more Tulsa King and how that came about. You've been an actor for a long time. You've got a lot of acting, credits under you. If you check out your IMDb, kind of tell us a little bit. We'll step back a minute. Tell us a little bit about early life, where you grew up, and how you, kind of found your way into this acting game.
Born and raised in Chicago, Little Italy, Italian background. Parents are off the boat, first generation. To be honest with you, I never wanted to be an actor. Like I went to high school, played college football. I got into all that, played a little pro football, and acting just kind of fell into my lap, kind of a thing. I was doing a fitness calendar in Jamaica. The woman that was running the event was like, "Hey man, there's somebody out in California you got to meet. You got to go out there." And I took a shot. I was like, "All right, I'll go." Met with this casting director. He handed me a piece of paper, looked like a bunch of words. They were their sides. I basically auditioned for General Hospital, and I got it. And that's how quick it happened for me. But growing up, it was sports. It was I wanted to be a lawyer. I went to school. I was a poli-sci major when I graduated. So acting wasn't something that I really gravitated to until I came out and I auditioned, and then the bug bit me. Once I got on set, I was like, this is it. I love this. Then I got knocked off the show, and I felt what the starving actor was all about. Like I learned that lesson quick, because when I first got the job on GH, I'm like, oh, this is easy. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? How hard is this going to be? I got a job, got knocked off the show, and I'm like, oh, this is the struggle. And 21 years later, I'm still doing it. So I did something right.
Yeah, for sure. Growing up in Chicago, I mean, that is a well-known town where a lot of mob activity. Did you see any mob activity in the area where you grew up?
No. Yeah, no, that's we hung out with a bunch of cool Italian guys. I used to hang out at a place called Jilly's down on Rush Street, and it was known to be a mob hangout where a lot of the South Side Chicago mobsters hung out, the outfit guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Those guys, man, were tough. And I don't think they get I mean, I know they get the credit they deserve in that world when you're talking about them. But I mean, when you talk about guys like Tony Accardo from that era, I mean, just, stand up as they come, never went to jail, was pretty much the boss of the outfit for years. Like that's not something a lot of people can say,
as the boss. I think they based The Godfather off of him a little bit, because Don Corleone didn't go to prison as the boss. Tony Accardo's the only boss that never did time.
Right.
He stepped down. They still respected him. I'm friends with a lot of Column Associated guys back in the day. Jackie Cerrone, his history. He became, Jackie the Lackey. He was Tony Accardo's right guy. He became boss for a while. I'm friends with his grandson. We hung out quite a bit in Chicago. But yeah, Tony Accardo doesn't get the credit he rightfully deserves in that world. It was funny. They were going to do a movie about him, and I think Pacino and De Niro were both up for playing Accardo.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah, I think Pacino would have probably been good for that. I want to say I'm not 100% sure, and a lot of times it's hard to vet what's true because so much stuff is on TikTok and the internet. And when you look, I want to say they said that the Bosa twins had some lineage to Tony Accardo.
Some, but that's.
I don't think it's direct, but it's like their moms, maybe somewhere. I forgot. I don't know the exact lineage, but they were talking about it. They were talking about people that, were stars that you wouldn't know that had direct lineage to people that were involved in organized crime.
I think it was his nephew or something like that, or he's a great nephew, right? It was
something along those. It's kind of like a distant down the line, but still there is a lineage to it.
Yeah.
And I mean, the historicals, I've never visited Chicago. I've always wanted to. But I mean, when you talk about organized crime in Chicago, I mean, so many important figures come out. I mean, obviously Al Capone was a big
Right.
one. Sam Giancana, another big one. I mean, he was really intricate, involved with JFK, Marilyn Monroe. I mean, just, Sam was a big deal. Yeah. The Las Vegas setup, Joey Aiuppa, all those guys. And I think Momo probably, and that's was, what they called Sam, his nick, he probably deserves a documentary too. Just everything that he was involved in.
I think there was a doc. Is it on Netflix? There's something that's out there about Sam.
Something on Amazon one time that was on him. But I mean, just like nowadays, like the way they do these I just think there's something that they could do on him that was just really good. I mean, I know they done the Capone movie with Tom Hardy, but it more focused on his afterlife, and it wasn't really, it was good, but it wasn't what I think people were expecting. I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, let's see who else. You had the Nitties, like they did a thing about Frank Nitti in Chicago. Yeah, the guys. I mean, I'm sure coming up they're going to do something about no-nos. They'll do something about the clown. I guarantee something comes up a lot for those guys. And those guys, I hung out with a lot of guys that hung out with those guys. So like I knew what they were doing.
So I had what was it? Joey Seifert. You know who Joey Seifert is?
Joe Seifert.
So Danny Seifert was a guy that Joey Lombardo, Tony Spilotro, they were using his business to basically funnel money through.
Okay.
And the heat came down. They realized what they were doing. He was about to go to jail. And ultimately he was going to talk. And they came there to kill him. Joey happened to be there with his father. He's young, like real young at this time. And I think his wife was there. And this is, I mean, this is Joey's, telling me the story. His, Joe Lombardo put him in a closet while Tony Spilotro and I forgot the other guy's name, but he was a notorious guy. They basically shot him in his place of business.
Yeah, I heard that story. Now I know who you're talking about. Heard that story.
Yeah, and he had a show on the Reels Network. I think it was called Deadly Associate. But it was basically about how, I think if he'd I don't want to speak out of school and speak on anybody's situation, but it was like he didn't want to do the time they were going to offer him. And they were from what I understand, allegedly, they were going to take care of him. They were going to pay, make sure he was okay inside, make sure he had money when he got out, but he just didn't want to go to prison. And what happened ultimately happened. But a lot of times Spilotro was an interesting guy. Who a lot of people based on in the movie Casino. Joe Pesci played the character based on him. It was Nicky Santoro in the movie, but in real life it was based on Anthony Spilotro. Yeah,
and he was something too. But the funny thing is about Ant, he was well liked in Chicago.
Yeah,
like, well liked. Like his reputation in Chicago is impeccable. Like he was a great guy in the neighborhoods, but little did you know this guy would snap, and just you disappear in a heartbeat. But the Spilotro brothers, and then the guy, he just passed away, Andriaki, the builder. He was the boss of Elmwood Park. He just passed away. Like the old regime in Chicago, it's changing, man. Like it's changing with Lombardo gone now and Andriaki gone. Like I don't even know who these new guys that are kind of running the outfit now, who they are. But it's still there.
Yeah, you don't hear a lot about the New York or about the Chicago guys. You hear somewhat about the New York guys or who's in play and who's around. You just don't hear a lot about Chicago, which in a way is a good thing, I guess. I mean, if
under the radar.
If you're trying to maintain what you're doing up there, I'm assuming that's a good thing. I actually had a chance to interview. I'm sure you've seen Casino. Yes. I had a chance to interview. His name escapes me. Jesus, he was the lawyer. Good, Oscar Goodman.
Oh, okay.
Oscar Goodman was the lawyer for pretty much all those guys. He played himself in the movie. So the lawyer that's Joe Pesci's lawyer in the movie, he was actually the lawyer for Tony Spilotro. And
you see the pictures. You see the pictures of him. Yeah.
He went on to be mayor of Las Vegas for 3 terms, which was the max. And he's got a restaurant in the Plaza Hotel, which is down on Fremont Street, and there's a bronze statue of him and Anthony talking in front of the restaurant.
Oh, no way. I gotta go check. I
Yeah,
gotta go check.
next time you go to Vegas, and he was intricate too in the Mob Museum, and I seen that while I was out there. That was very cool. But if you go to Oscars in the Plaza, right at the front, there's a bronze statue of him and Tony standing there talking.
Oh man, I gotta check that out. That would be cool. Get a picture.
He said he was. Yeah, he said he was blown away at the movie because he's like, obviously it was a Scorsese set. You know, no expense was, you know, spared. Everything was top notch, you know, everything. And he's like, I'm there. And he said, I seen Joe dressed up like Spilotro. And he said, you know, I do enjoy my Bombay Sapphires. And he was like, I was looking at him like, how many of these have I had? I'm sure this man's dead, but he looked exactly like him. He said, from the mannerisms to the hair, he said it was him to a T.
No
That's
kidding.
how well he embodied that character.
I auditioned. I can't remember the name of the show right now off the top of my head, but I auditioned for Tony Spilotro. And they told me I was too tall.
Wow.
They told me I was too tall. Well, I mean, he was what, 5'6"?
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was a lot closer to Joe and how Joe looks in real life than Joe was compared to Tommy DeSimone from Goodfellas, because that guy was really, really tall.
Really tall. Yeah, the Goodfellas, speaking of Goodfellas, like they really didn't pin everybody exactly as the characters they were supposed to portray. In Casino, they kind of did, except for De Niro. Like he didn't really look anything at all. But yeah, literally nailed Spilotro. I mean, he hit everything that he was.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you? And he's from the Chicago area. I don't think he's there anymore. Do you remember the ASU basketball scandal?
The point shaving scandal?
Yeah. Arizona State point shaving scandal with Steven Headache Smith. The guy that helped facilitate and put that together, his name was Joe Gagliano. He was out of Chicago at the time. Him and the bookie on campus, Benny Silman. Mm-hmm. Benny had a headache in his pocket, and that's kind of how that whole thing began. I actually interviewed Joe, and he was from the Chicago area. Yeah, it was a very interesting interview. They I seen the show they had done on Netflix. There's a series called Bad Sport. And it's basically just how different people have used sports to, you know, I guess how they bend the rules or whatever. There was a guy named Randy Lanier that was like Le Mans driver where you would change drivers and just keep racing, but they were like smuggling pot. You know, they had the point shaving one. You had another one where it was like horse racing, but they had this guy that was hired to go around and kill the horses so these people could collect on insurance money.
No way.
And he could do it in a way to where it was really hard to detect that it wasn't, I think it was, they could say he died by the colic, but there was only like one way to tell that it wasn't the colic. And I guess nobody really ever checked. And so it was huge money. I mean, these horses were thousands of dollars. And like the guy, he got into it. The guy that he was working for was like, he was going through a divorce. And he's like, this horse is worth more to me dead than it is alive at this point. Can you kill it for me? And once he did that, that became his business. And he was horses. Yeah. I mean, on up the ladder to some of these top-notch people that, you know, are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars because they have these high price tags on these horses. So when the horses kind of got maybe past their prime or whatever,
they get long in the tooth, it's time to go.
Yeah. And I was just like, wow. I mean, it was a very interesting story. But I had Joe on and he went in depth about that. So I mean, Chicago's got a ton of history, man, and that's I've never been there. It's on my bucket list of cities to go to check out for sure. It's a lot of history.
It's great. And then if you get lucky enough and you want to do like some of the tours, they tore down the Al Capone Museum. Mm-hmm. They had a nice one there, and you know, do I get it? Yeah, kind of, sort of. But it's the history, man. It's like a part of what Chicago is. Like you can't say Chicago and not say Al Capone. You can't say Chicago and not have any of the outfit guys mentioned. I mean, the city in itself, you know, was built on their shoulders. It really was.
Yeah.
And
did you watch that show? I think it was called Mob Doctor. It was set around Chicago. I think.
Mob Doctor.
It had William Forsythe in it. Was like the bad guy. The blonde girl, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. She was like a doctor William Forsythe was kind of like a father figure to her,
Mhm.
and she kind of gets sucked into helping people in his world. And it only done one season. I guess it
One
didn't do
season.
good ratings wise, but I like the show. But I'm
Yeah.
gonna be a sucker for anything organized crime related anyway. So that's just me.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can give me anything organized crime. I'm gonna give it a watch. I'm
Yeah,
gonna watch it for sure. Yeah.
yeah. Like I said, I like that show. William Forsythe is a great actor. I mean, he's been in
He's
everything.
amazing. I tried to get William Forsythe for this upcoming movie that we're doing with Kevin. We'll get into that a little bit later. But William Forsythe was someone that we had mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, he's great, man. So when you got into acting, I mean, like, what was like the first kind of, I would say one that you got more excited about than any? I mean, obviously, I know that first one's always going to be good, but what was the first one that you really got excited about working with some of the more, popular name guys? What was the first one?
Joe Montana when I did Criminal Minds and I got to work with
Yeah.
him. I mean, come on, Joey Zaza, from The Godfather. An Italian American. He's from Chicago. Like when I got to be on set with him, it was really cool. And we sat down for lunch and we talked the Cubs, we talked Chicago, we talked acting. That was a really, really, really cool experience. And then that one got topped when I worked with The Rock. I mean,
Yeah.
that when I did Red Notice, that
Did you
was
work?
just.
Have you worked with him twice, or that was?
I did two movies. I didn't work with him directly on Central Intelligence,
Okay.
but when we did Red Notice, I had
Right.
to see him with
Him and
him.
Ryan.
Yeah.
What about? Did you have any run-ins with Kevin on Central Intelligence?
No. Central Intelligence was I was a stunt guy, and then I did some looping in it. So it was really a small role.
The Rock and Ryan Reynolds was in Red. What was The Rock like? I mean, seeing him. I mean,
to see him, he's a beast. He's a figure in its own. Like he's cut from marble. Like he's just that. But the way he is on Instagram is the way he is in person. Like everyone on set would always say, like that he remembered everyone's name. He said hi to everybody, treated everybody as if they were equal. Like he is hands down one of the most amazing men in Hollywood. Ryan Reynolds, so cool. I saw him in the makeup chair next to me, and we went back and forth a little bit, and then we saw each other again at the premiere, and he remembered who I was. Like takes a lot to you work with a ton of people, and to remember I don't want to say the lesser known actors because I don't want to make myself lesser than anything else, but not at his stature. Like right away, hey guy, how are you? I'm like, hey Ryan, what's up? It was really cool.
And it's strange because I grew up a wrestling fan, and when The Rock was in WWE, Prime Rock, I mean, that was like the Attitude Era, hottest time in the business, probably still is today. I think probably the best, most entertaining time period in wrestling. And The Rock was on top of his game, and obviously he was in shape, but he's nowhere near what he is now. And it's like the older he got, the bigger he got, the more just of this legend, this hero-esque figure. And I mean, I've watched him from, what was the movie he did? The Walking Tall, The Rundown, The Mummy, and then the progression of now he's just like box office gold. He can't do it wrong.
Yeah. He's got the Midas touch right now. You put him in a movie, it's making money. You put him in a movie and he's reading the phone book, it'll make money. As long as he's throwing the phone book at somebody, like he's got to hit somebody, right? I don't think he's doing Shakespeare anytime soon.
Yeah, what was that movie where Skyscraper or something like that?
Skyscraper, a friend of mine directed that movie. Yeah,
really?
The same guy that directed Red Notice and Central Intelligence directed that movie.
And I mean, like, I don't know if the money was like great. I know it made money, but I don't know if the money was like great in the United States, but like overseas, it done huge money.
Yeah, the foreign sales for him is incredible. It's incredible. Anything overseas for him, domestically, it's weird when it comes to actors domestically because you got about this much time right in there to make as much as you can, because then you just become another figure unless you can sit there and work the sly angle where you've been working since the 70s, right? And you're still in demand. He's in that world. The Rock is in that world. Dwayne, I don't think he's not going to not work. I think that the public still wants to see him, and it goes back to the WWE time frame because our generation watched them.
Oh yeah,
right. So we kind of grew up with with him being the entertainer. So to watch him in the future wouldn't hurt us because it's we're watching ourselves grow up.
And they're big, like the other areas and markets. I mean, they were big wrestling fans anyway, so they probably remember him from those wrestling. They're going to embrace that. I mean, those guys used to say they got paid a ton of money to go overseas and wrestle to different places. I mean, a ton of money.
I mean, Hogan, go back that time, like Hogan was doing the same thing. I'm a huge wrestling fan myself. Like, but I'm an '80s. I'm the cartoon era.
Yeah,
you know, Big John Studd. Andre the Giant.
I was watching Strike. What was that movie he did with Mickey Rourke? Oh, Harley Davidson and the Marlboro Man. You remember that?
Harley Davidson. Yeah.
Big John was there.
Mickey Rourke and what's his name? Don Johnson.
Yeah, Don Johnson, Mickey Rourke. Tom Sizemore was in that movie. It was I interviewed Tom. I got a chance to interview Tom.
Oh, did you?
Before he passed away, and he was saying, he was like, it was like, because you have an actor on, especially somebody like him. He's been in like all this stuff, so you don't want to badmouth the movie. And he's like, "What'd you think of that movie?" And I'm like, "It's all right, it's one of the movies that if I see on, I'm gonna watch it because it's got that buddy aspect to it." And he's like, he just kind of smiled. And he's like, "That movie was bad, bro." And I'm like, "Better." And he's like, "I just did it because I wanted to work with Mickey." He's like, "That's the only reason why I did the movie." He's like, "I wanted to work with Mickey."
There's a couple actors that I'll do pretty much almost anything to work for.
Yeah.
Work with, I should say. Like if you gave me something that was just a terrible script and you're like, "Hey man, Pacino and De Niro in it," and I'm like, "Okay,
yeah,
cool,
yeah,
great." You want to tell the story of the Three Little Pigs? Yeah, great, whatever. I'm in. I'll be a pig. Let's run. Like, let's go do it. So yeah, just to work with those guys would be great. Like those are still bucket list guys, even though they're getting older and they're not doing as much work anymore, and they're usually cartooning themselves up. Mm-hmm. Those are the two guys that I'd love to jump into and work with.
And Hogan, I mean, like still going after all those years. I mean, I grew up in that era too that you're talking about, the Big John Studd, Andre the Giant, Jake the Snake. And I was Jake's still hanging around, but so many of those guys, man, have passed away and for one thing or another. And it's
Sid Vicious just died.
I know. And I was just at an event. He canceled it. He was always kind of notorious for canceling some of these autograph shows. But I was supposed to see him, and I was supposed to be like 3 events before that he was going to be there. And I always wanted to get a picture with him and talk with him, and I never got the chance. It was in St. Augustine. And then I was supposed to go to the gathering in Charlotte, which was beginning of August, and I didn't make it. He was at that. And then unfortunately he wound up passing away, but I never got to personally meet him. But I mean, what a character, dude. I mean, like still to this day, I think if you just go off looks and physicality, like he had one of the better looks that you would ever see in the ring. I mean, the mic skills were so.
He just didn't get over. He just didn't get over with the crowd because I know I read the article about him. Like they were pushing him. Like the WWE was really pushing him at one point.
Oh yeah, he come in and won the title.
He just wasn't getting over with the crowd. I mean, but he was also in that world with Lex Luger, who was they made a big push with him.
Yeah.
And did you see the documentary on that one on Lex? Like they made a big push for him. And again, the crowd he didn't get over with the crowd. And then
the Lex Express push they made for.
Yep.
When he
I remember all those guys. Those are crazy times, man. I love that time.
Yokozuna, when he slammed Yokozuna, when he landed that plane and slammed Yokozuna. But see, Sid was in there twice in WWE. They made a push. He come in around the WrestleMania 9 mark, and he had a fight with Hogan. That's when Ric Flair was in there. He fought Macho Man. Then years later, he come back and feuded with Shawn Michaels. But yeah, I mean, they tried a couple of times, but they also said Sid had a bad, I won't say habit, but he would leave to go play softball. That was his thing. He loved to play softball. And so when it got softball season, he would be like, all right, I'm gone for a little while, and then duck out. So it's hard to put the strap on somebody, for a long period of time if you know that. But if you need somebody like that to give your guy a 2 or 3 month break while he recuperates from an injury or whatever, he was great.
Yeah.
He was a great fill-in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a big wrestling fan too, man. And like I said, seeing those guys, a lot of them make that transition. I think hands down, Hogan might have kind of paved the way, and he did his thing back in the 90s. Mr. Nanny, Suburban Commando, No Holds Barred. He kind of done that. Steve Austin done it a little bit to an extent.
Well,
Roddy Piper.
He was the first one ever in 1983 when he did Rocky 3.
Yeah.
Like he was the first one ever to break into the true Hollywood market of films. Because I think some of the older guys were put in films, but as themselves. I think Bruno Sammartino might have done something, they put him in a movie as an announcer, as Bruno. But he was the first one to become a character and not playing Hulk Hogan. And it was in 1983. And I think Vince, at that time, Vince McMahon actually feuded against him because he did it outside the WWF.
It was Vince's father. It was Vince. I guess that would be Junior, right? Yeah, or Senior. Senior. Yeah, Vince Senior. I actually fired him for it, I think, when he did that.
Yep,
fired him, and then Junior wound up hiring him back. Yeah.
Oh, but he did it. But he paved the way because now John Cena isn't doing movies now if it wasn't for that. The Rock isn't doing movies, right? He really opened up Hollywood, and Hollywood Hogan came through later on, but he actually opened that up for the other wrestlers to become big name. Not that they weren't big names in the industry, but become a well-known name throughout. Like everybody knew them then, or household names.
Yeah, you have that crossover. I mean, Jesse the Body was in a few. Roddy Piper was in a few. They Live with John Carpenter, and he was in a lot of other ones. But by and large, I think The Rock, and you could definitely put Cena in that category too. Just kind of took it to another level. But The Rock is just, he's
he blew it up. He blew it up. It's funny story about John Cena. So in the last Fast and the Furious that came out, the one that he played Vin Diesel's brother.
Right.
I auditioned for that part. And my manager's telling me, oh, the producers love you. You're in the top 5. I'm like, oh, wow, this is great. I find out who gets cast. I'm like, the top 5? I'm like, John Cena got cast. I'm like, who was in the top 5? Who was I going up against? I'm like, did I go up against Leo? I'm like, what do you mean the top 5? Like, there was no way that they weren't going to go with John Cena.
It sucks not to get that part in a movie like that, but just to say you were in the top 5 but
I think she was just making me feel good, because I'm like, wow.
I'll take it,
John Cena versus Guy Nardulli right now. I'm like,
one of them things. I was in the top 5. I didn't get the part, but I was in the top 5.
I was top 5. I got the participation award for that one.
I'd go with that. What a series that's got going. I think they're about to wrap it up. I think they said they're going to do one more and call it quits. But I remember the first one. Yes, I think they just did 10. They're going to do 11. I remember watching the first one, and this was I just got I'd had my license for a small period of time, and back then street racing was pretty huge in the area where I was growing up. We would get together on Sundays. It was out in the country. Everybody would race. So I remember everybody going to that movie and just leaving. And of course, everybody's leaving, spinning tires, speeding, driving like crazy. And just like from there to now, what that franchise has become is truly amazing. And I just, they've literally done everything. They've literally went into space. I think they
drove a tank in space.
Yeah.
It's so funny for guys that were jacking, hijacking trucks, right?
Yeah.
To all of a sudden being in space, driving a tank. It's like, where did you learn how to do that? Like, where did that all come from?
Yeah, hijacking 18-wheelers in their prime back in the day.
Yeah.
And DVD players. And
now they're all in space, crazy. Moving because the tank. All right, let's get back home and fire the tank and use. That's so
but it
funny.
makes money though, man. Those things make money.
It does. It's a machine. It's a Coca-Cola machine out here. If it works once, it'll work twice, and then you just keep pumping it. They just keep pumping it until it's done.
Yeah. And I don't even it's hard to, even though the last one I don't think done financially as well as some of the other ones, it's still made money. And assumingly now they do wrap it up. It's been a hell of a run. And I think it's just one of the movies that, it's like for guys who like a movie for guys who like movies, that action doesn't really have to make a whole lot of sense. Doesn't really have to follow a whole lot of plot lines.
Things are blowing up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things are blowing up. There's a couple good looking girls in there. Yeah.
And that Tulsa King kind of fit that because I think the world, when we had Sopranos, it took television to another level. Sopranos.
It put HBO on the map. It literally. It launched HBO.
I think I remember I watched Oz a little bit. That was kind of like the first TV show, but then, and not a lot of people were into that because it was prison. It was a really tough show to watch. I mean, if you weren't used to it, but when Sopranos came out, it just changed the game. And I mean, even now, all these years later, I say this and people are probably tired of me saying it, but I'll repeat it especially for people that are in the acting business, because you would appreciate it. If you watch that show today, the only thing that dates that show is the technology.
That's it.
That is it. You could play that tomorrow, and outside of the phones and computers, it would be a perfect show tomorrow. The writing,
story,
everything was superb. You just couldn't ask for no better. And I think that really just changed the landscape of TV. And it lets you know, like,
storytelling. It was storytelling, and it was great storytelling. And you can't you don't want to take it further back. Go to The Godfather, right? If it, that was done in the 70s. The story lives today. That's why it's such a great movie, right? Yeah. And it's not, right? Everyone's like, oh, it's a mob movie. Yeah, but you got to watch this. It's not, it's not the underbelly of the mob. Like, that's like what the family is, and its values and its traditions and its things like that. The Sopranos did the same thing. All they did was they turned around. They were telling a story about this guy and his family and his life and how it's affecting him. And he could have been the CEO of AT&T, and you could still tell the same story because it was about that. They just really put the flowers in the pot by making it, the mob story. Because at the end of the day, Public Enemy, going back to, James Cagney, all the way up to now, right? Everybody loves a good mob story. It's never going to change. It's never going to change. The five families in New York, the families in Chicago, the family, the Tropicana in Florida. You want to take it, the first mob family that started in New Orleans when they first came into the country. Like, you've got stories, and it's not necessarily the story of killing and stealing. It's the story of togetherness, right? It's a story of how to make it. Like, people are going to hold you back. Fine. You get together with the group that you need to get together with, and you make it. You make it yourself. You build the bricks to build the foundation, to build the house, to build the city. And that's what they did. That's what the Italians did when they came to this country. That's what they did. They got together, and they needed to protect themselves. And that's where the mob comes from. That's where, like, the mafia, all the stories, like how it started in Sicily, where mafia was actually what the woman was screaming, her daughter, my fia, like you were saying. And that's where the mafia the word came from.
Yeah. Get the French out.
In the essence of it all, it's about family. And it relates with everybody. Italians, the French, all nationalities can relate to family. And that's what it's about. And I think that's why Tulsa King is doing so well again, because it's about family. Like, here, he took a traditional Italian core, right? You have to be Italian, or otherwise you can't be in the mob, right? You can't be part of the family. Moves to Tulsa, sets up a family there, and it's an eccentric group. Like, it's everybody, right? It's not, and he built that up, and it's a loyalty thing, and that's what it's about. And people resonate to those types of stories.
Yeah, 100%. And you hit the nail on the head, because, like, The Godfather is often considered, one of the greatest movies of all time. Sopranos is often considered the best TV show of all time. There's no coincidence. Both of them kind of, have the same elements to it, with organized crime. And I interviewed Chris Colombo. I've actually interviewed him a couple of times. I stayed at his house. He was the father, he was the son of Joe Colombo. Joe was his father. And Joe was really instrumental in getting The Godfather done. And one of the things that was done, and it's like, you know what The Godfather is about, but you never really realize it. They never said the word mafia in that movie.
Nope.
At one time.
Nope. Did you watch The Offer?
Yes, I did.
They talk about the whole thing. I read the book. I actually got the book. I'm looking at it right now. Bofo. It's about the story of the making of The Godfather. And that whole bit, like Joe Colombo, the Italian Federation of America?
Italian American Civil Rights League.
Civil Rights League leader. Like, hey, he set that up, right? Because read Italians, born and raised first generation. First thing people ask you, are you in the mob? You're in the mob. But you always get that underbelly of who we are. And it's not that, man. It's not that, right? And he set that up. And in order to keep the Italians from looking like an underbelly of the world, you couldn't mention mafia. And I think that was great because the story was still there, right? Everybody, Don Corleone, you know, there was the Capo regime. Like they used all the verbiage, just never mentioned mafia.
Right.
And it's, you know, if you, like I said, you did a movie about AT&T, there's a boss, there's underbosses, there's associates, there's soldiers.
Structure the same,
It's structured. It's a business structure, right? I'm not trying to glorify the organized crime aspect of it all, but at the end of the day, it was organized.
It's something to be said. Like you said, you come from nothing, especially like The Godfather, coming over as an immigrant. You build up this thing that becomes this huge organization. And I always tell people, like, by and large, if mobsters and gangsters hadn't went into that type of life, if they'd have went into legitimate businesses, there's no doubt in my mind they'd have been Fortune 500 company CEOs, like multimillionaires. I mean, easy, because of the brains that you have to be able to put something like that together and run an organization like that. There's no way they wouldn't have, flourished in regular business. Just so happens at the time there was other business ventures that they went into.
Yeah, they went and they found a way to cheat the system. They cheated the system. Was it harsh with some of the things that the mob did? Yeah, it is. But it's within the structure and the rules of the organized crime division. That's it. It's just how it works.
And I think when Tulsa King come along, people have been waiting for something, along the lines to kind of give them that mafia fix. You had Sopranos, it went off there. You had Boardwalk Empire for a period of time. It was a period piece. You went back a little bit, still very well, acted and well done by all those guys that was in there. I think it had been waiting for another good show. And when it come along, like I said, I think because it was Sly, everybody was curious to see how it was going to go and how he was going to be able to handle that role. Because if he's too over the top, then it becomes cheesy. But if he's just right, then it can be a good show.
Perfect.
And I said, I'll be able to tell pretty quick if this is going to be a good one. And when he just has that relaxed tone, he's a little bit more calm, cool, collected. And I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be good. And then Dominic goes in there.
There's levity to it. He makes fun of situations and he has fun. Yeah. But you mentioned two shows again, like Sopranos and Boardwalk Empire. One of the writers for those shows is one of the creators of Tulsa King. It's Terrence Winter. So
Terrence Winter. Yeah, great.
Terry, came aboard with Taylor Sheridan, and now they created this great. It's a new monster. Like I don't think this is not going to not continue. But knock on wood, because Johnny the Zip needs to come back to work. But season one did great.
Episode, you're coming towards the end, right? Of season one, you come in a little bit towards the end.
Yeah, season one, I came in episode 8, which just aired Sunday on CBS, and that was the great thing about it now, because season one went from Paramount Plus to CBS, so we picked up a broader audience. And now season 2 is coming out September 15th on Paramount Plus, and hopefully after the season airs on Paramount Plus, CBS picks it up and just touches the broader audience. But Johnny the Zip is the character I play. I show up in episode 8 of season 1.
Right. And you have a little talk where they're talking about possibly taking somebody out, and you're telling them that that's not how, it should be. And, there's rules that people don't understand, the mob movies. There's rules. You can't, a made man can't go and kill a man that's not made. There has to be rules.
You can't go killing a boss. The second, right? I mean, Dwight came out of prison after doing 25 years, right? So the whole storyline of season 1, he comes out after doing 25 years, goes back to New York, and the family in New York is now under a new regime. Dominic Lombardozzi, who plays Chicky, he's like, "Hey man, we're sending you out to Tulsa, Oklahoma," and he's like, "For what? For out the pasture or whatever." So he builds his own family out there, right? And then we sit around after Pete, who was the boss of the family, which was Chicky's dad, dies in there. I won't give up too much if anyone didn't see season 1, but Chicky becomes the new boss, and we're sitting around at the funeral, at Pete's funeral, and Chicky and the whole crew is talking about taking Dwight out. And my character, I'm like, guys, that's not a good idea. I'm like, he's a legend. He's like, you can't just go taking a boss out. Like, that's not how it works. Like, you got to go up the ladder. You got to check. You got to make sure that all the boxes are checked off before you can take someone out like that. And it's like, I don't think that's a good idea. And Chicky and I butted heads on that one. And, you know, I made it through season 1, and season 2, you know, we talk about it, you know, talk about change, you know, and there's elements in season 2 that the audience is just going to fall in love with, you know, and there's the New York faction, you know, we're still heavily involved. And, you know, Frank Grillo is now on the show. Neil McDonough is now on the show.
Mm-hmm.
So they got their storylines that are popping off against Dwight, and it's making for a really, really good show because there's always something to be told.
Yeah. And I just think when you have that backdrop of the organized crime, it just makes things so much more interesting than just a regular story. It adds another element to it when you have that backdrop. And Max Casella does a great job in there. You know, obviously he was in Sopranos and a bunch of, he's been in
Chris Caldovino, who plays. Yeah, he's awesome in it.
What's the guy that's escaping me? He played Lucky in Boardwalk Empire, but he's in there. Vincent Piazza.
Vincent Piazza. He's man. You want to talk about an amazing actor? He's an amazing actor, man. And this season, in season 2, I can kind of share this a little bit. He and I grow a little bit more of a bond in season 2, and man, amazing. Dom too, man. Like, the guys are just, but Vince gives, man, and he's so talented. He played Lucky Luciano on Boardwalk Empire.
Yeah, he was great. He was great with, like, I would fast forward through certain scenes just so I could get the scenes with him and Meyer. Like, I just love when he was on screen, and to be with all those guys that was in there, all those great actors. William Forsythe, another one we talked about that was in there. You know, Steve Buscemi, all those top-notch actors, and like, he's holding his own. Like,
and you remember him.
Power, yeah, you remember
him. Like, you know, you see him, like, you still see him, and you hear his, like, he's got that, man. He's got charisma. He's got talent. It was just working with him and Dom. I couldn't ask for, you know, a better cast to be blessed to work with. They were both awesome.
And Dom's done a bunch of great stuff too. I mean, he was in The Wire. It was such a great show.
Entourage back in the day.
Entourage. I think he had a little stint in Ray Donovan as well.
Ray
Donovan. He had that show, Breakout Kings. You remember that show? Did you watch that show?
Yeah.
I remember one of them. It tied into Prison Break. It was like they were chasing a guy. They were chasing T-Bag, the character from Prison Break. And it like tied it in. I was like, how the hell is this even tying into that? But I mean,
well, Dom has a beautiful, like, mob-rich history. I think Dom's first movie was A Bronx Tale. Let's see if you can remember who Dom played.
I remember this. Somebody was telling me about it the other day because I interviewed Lilo Brancato one time. Was he one of the kids on the steps?
No, he wasn't on the steps.
Who was he?
Okay, you remember when they all went and they were looking to buy a gun? He's like, yeah, that's the gun you should get. That's the gun. Yeah, that feels so good. Yeah, this gun in my hand. He's the kid that was selling them the guns.
Oh, wow.
He was the kid selling them the guns.
He also was, just to be in that cast had to be something crazy. But I think it was it Fat Tony in The Irishman?
Yes. Really? Yes, he was in The Irishman. Yeah. And man, they redid him. He looks nothing like.
If you would have not known that was him, like, I mean, obviously I know him. I know what he kind of looks like, and I could tell. And I waited on that movie. Seemed like forever for it to finally come out. But just what a role, what a cast. I mean, like, you know, I don't even know if I would classify that as a mob flick. I mean, it definitely had a lot of people from that world, but I love The Irishman. Not so much on the factual side of things. I understand that, you know, apparently Sharon embellished a lot, but just to have those guys back together again, De Niro, Pesci finally coming back, mixed with all those guys. I mean, just top.
You know, you had it all in that one. That was great. And then, funny thing about that one too, Crazy Joe Gallo went to Sebastian Maniscalco.
Yep. Were you in line for that?
I read for that too. I read for that too.
You'd have been good for that. Sebastian at the time, like I didn't know a lot of his comedic background. So like, I mean, he done all right, but I think he would have done great in that role.
Well,
Even,
thanks.
even
He did
Razor.
all right.
Yeah, he did good. Even
Yeah.
what's Cannavale, Bobby Cannavale?
I love Bobby Cannavale. Oh, I love him. Love him, man. I'd love to. Oh man, I would love to work with him too. He's amazing.
His role in Boardwalk as Gyp Rossetti was one of the more memorable roles that I can see. Every now and again, you just have a guy that you can tell just relishes that role, even if it's just for a season, and is just on point. You can't get any better. And sometimes I used to have a name that I would go by as Chip, CHIP. And I was in this club one night. I was back home, and somebody asked like, "What's your name?" And it's loud, so I'm kind of yelling in her ear. You know, I'm like Chip. And she's like Gyp, and I'm like, "Yep, Gyp Rossetti. Nice to meet you." I just rolled with it. But I was like, yeah, I was like that dude. But that, and he's been in a ton of stuff. Like he's been in all kinds of stuff, like comedy. You know, I think he was in Sex and the City. He done that movie with the comedian, the bald guy that's real funny, old dads or whatever. And Bokeem Woodbine. I can't think of the comedian right now. White guy, bald head, beard. Is it Bill Burr? Bill Burr?
Oh, Bill Burr. Bill Burr. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're like
guy, right?
old dads, I think is what it's called. And it's just it was funny.
He's done plays, he's done A View from the Bridge. Like Bobby's just
but he just embodied that role of Gyp Rossetti in Boardwalk Empire, man. I mean, it was just like, to me, he's going to always be him. Like, no matter what he does, unless he just does something that just overtakes that, that's going to be him. But I love The Irishman, man. Like I said, I didn't look at it so much for factual events, but just seeing all those guys acting again, you know, together, because like, to me, I didn't know if I would ever see that. You know,
right. And it was really cool. It was really cool to have all those guys together. Because the last time De Niro and Pacino did something together, I think it was Heat.
Righteous Kill, that cop movie.
The cop movie.
It gets glossed over a little bit. There was a cop movie they did together. Heat was another great one they did. And then actually to get Joe in the mix, I don't think
all three of them to be in it, man. That's the trifecta of all. And then Scorsese directing it. Like, you can't ask. The only thing you could have done is thrown in Leonardo DiCaprio and said, "Hey, you got the whole thing. You got a royal flush. You're good to go."
And even at the end, like those scenes at the end when they were in prison and they've aged them and they're sitting there talking about anything, like when he's Russell Buffalino's character is like real old and they're eating the bread or whatever. I mean, it was just bread
with the wine.
I remember they come out around November on Netflix, and I remember sitting there and I just carved out like the 3.5 hours time and I watched it straight through. I sat
down with my ex. She fell asleep, and I just sat there. And I was still watching it, man. I was like,
yeah,
I was enamored by it, you know.
And I mean, what do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Shows like Tulsa King, what's going on right now? Everybody's been waiting for it. The writer's strike was it the writer's strike or the actor's strike?
The writer's strike and the actor's strike. 23 was a tough year, man. They shut down the whole city shut down for us. Like there was nothing because we went on strike and we were supposed to start shooting season 2 in 23. So you know,
my wife saying they didn't cancel that show, did they? And I'm like, no, they're just, you know, it's a holdup right now because of all the strikes. But that's kind of my question. What do you think is so appealing about all these shows? What do you think hooks people when you have that backdrop of the organized crime? Because obviously you got to have the storylines, you got to have the people. What do you think so appealing?
It's definitely the story, and it's the understanding of what it's about, right? You can't look at it in the scheme of killing. You can't look at it in thievery and stealing and being in the underbelly of anything in the world. You got to look at it as it's telling a story about a family, right? And a rise, right? And the beautiful thing with Sly and everything that he's done, pretty much almost everything he's done, he's always the underdog.
Right.
Think about it. He's always an underdog. You know, Lords of Flatbush, Stanley, underdog. Rocky, underdog. You know, go down the line. Expendables, maybe not the underdog, but still, you know, he's going up against Rambo. He's got to go against, you know, an entire army, right?
Even Copland, like you mentioned, going up against
he's got to go. Tulsa King, he takes a bunch of unknowns, right? The guys that are just working in a dispensary and turns them into a formidable family. right?
And it makes sense. That was my thing too. I'm like, all right, well, how are they going to apply those things in Tulsa? Like, that's the last place you would think a mob movie is going to, or a mob series or whatever is going to go take place. How's this going to work? And it did. It works. It makes sense.
Because it makes sense. He takes these unknowns, right? These people that know nothing of that world, and makes them into this loyal, valued family. And he sits on top of that, right? He sits in control of it, which the backdrop has the mafia or the mob, background to it. But again, I think the audience, granted, it's Stallone. Like, I think you could put Stallone in pretty much anything and everyone's going to watch it. But if you put Stallone in and you put, Sheridan and Winters and combined geniuses, right, in putting together a show, then you surround it with the cast that he has, that helps a lot. But the story, again, I think it's the story, because middle America, right? Let's be honest. If it's not for middle America watching television, a lot of things don't get seen. That's the world you got to live in. That's the world that you got to cater to. And what do they want to see? They want to escape their reality, right? And they want to go into a world that is exciting, right? It's intriguing, it's dark, but yet it's relatable, right? So they could sit there and be like, nah, man, I feel that way because at work this and this happens to me, and I know what Dwight's going through, right? And all of a sudden you become relatable in the least way possible, but you're relatable to them. Like, you're not in the mob.
I think that's what, you hit it on the head. That's what hooks people, because even myself, like, just having to deal with people in your work and in your personal life or whatever, you run through these scenarios that have always popped up in the show. Like, obviously I'm not talking about the, the killing people, but just the everyday scenarios, the mother that's getting on your nerves, the wife that won't stop nagging at you, the kid that's ungrateful, the daughter that won't listen, all those things, like you said, you can relate. And with the Sopranos
did that. Like, Sopranos, like, totally, like, they capitalized on that. The anxiety attacks that Tony Soprano has, Carmela, right, going through her turmoil with, do I want to cheat on my husband with the priest, and like just having thoughts, right? Like, these aren't mob related. This is life, man. The daughter that's just being, like Meadow is just being, a typical 16-year-old girl, right? And the kid, told little baby Anthony, just trying to be dad's kid, but just not being that capable, right? It relates. Everybody relates to this. Like I got two younger sisters, and I could be like, oh no, I get that.
Oh yeah, I've got a sister that reminds me so much of Janice. It's crazy. And my wife will sit there. She's like, she's just like your sister. Like, I mean, every facet of her, man. We were watching one the other night, and it was like, I think it was the one where they had the Italian feast, and she was on the ride, and something happened to it. And so, like, Bobby was mad at Paulie for skimping on the security.
The carnival. I think it was the St. Ignatius Carnival.
Yeah. And they're sitting there at the table, and Meadow's like, well, they probably are entitled to damages. And she's kind of sitting there, and like, you see her kind of twinge her neck and go to rub her neck like that right there. And he's like, leave it alone, Janice. And the next scene, they pull up, and she's in like a full-blown neck break. my wife says, she's like, that's your sister. That is your sister right there, 100%. But it's so relatable though. Like, you're right. You don't have to be involved in organized crime for all those things to be relatable. And we quote stuff from that show all the time. Like, if I'm ever ready to go somewhere, like to leave somewhere where we're at, there's a scene where they're having dinner, and Junior keeps dicking with Tony, saying he never had the makings of a varsity athlete, saying it over and over. And he finally just gets pissed, and he throws his damn plate down. He's like, son of a bitch. He's like, I'm leaving. And he looks at AJ, and he's like, get your coat. And he's like, I don't have a coat. And he goes, get moving, God damn it. And so they'd leave. And I always just crack up at that scene when I see it. So whenever we're somewhere and I'm ready to go, that's like my code without saying. I'm like, I look at my son, his name is Jax. I'm like, Jax, get your coat. And he's like, I don't have a coat. Get moving, goddamn. It's time to go. That's my code, to go. But I mean, great series, man. We could talk about that all day long. And I think Tulsa King is right in line with that, because I think in a way, a wait might have been a good thing. It's let people want it more. and they're really excited about it. So we're less than 2 weeks away now from it coming back on. I, for one, can't wait to see it. I know you can't give out a ton about season 2. Can we expect to possibly see you in season 3?
We could go as far as saying there's a good chance that I could be seen in season 3. Like
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've already kind of said it that way. I survived what could be something that's happening in the series. Like there's a lot going on. There's a lot happening. A lot of changes. A lot of great stories. The storyline it's going to take you surprises. Like you're going to see things and you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. They got together, and season 2 is definitely going to be a great season that's going to lead to a season 3 for sure. Nice. And Johnny the Zip is involved a little bit more throughout this season. Like you'll see my face more often than you did in season 1.
Nice. Well, I hope everybody goes and checks that out. If you hadn't seen Tulsa King season 1, check that out. Get ready for Tulsa King season 2 dropping on the 15th. You said
September 15th, Paramount Plus.
September 15th, Paramount Plus. You've got another project in the works right now with a former guest we've had on here, Kevin Interdonato. What you got working with Kevin right now?
We got a little action movie called Dirty Hands. It's going to be filmed in Chicago, so I get to go home in my hometown and film another movie there. It's about two brothers who do one last job for their boss, and it goes awry, and it all takes place within one night. And the two brothers are getting chased by the boss that they kind of screwed over. And through hell or high water, they got to try to get out of this jam. And I play Rodney. I play one of the bosses that's chasing. Kevin's character is Danny. Patrick Muldoon is attached to this movie. He's playing Richie. We got Denise Richards, who is playing Sheila. Michael Beach, who's playing Dally, who plays the big boss in the movie. Set in Chicago. Gritty, like Thief. I kind of leaned it on Pope of Greenwich Village a little bit with the two brothers. So it sits in that genre, but it's more action than it is drama thriller.
Good. If anybody's trying to track you down on social media and give you a follow, where can they go to track you down on socials?
Well, on the IG, it's Safety 24. I'll give you a background on it. It was my football position and number, and it stuck. In, like my first vanity plates were Safety 24, so it just stuck. Guy M. Nardulli on Facebook, and I think it's called X now. It's not Twitter anymore. It's at Guy 24.
Yeah, that's like my least most active profile. Nothing against it, but I don't
use it as often, but it's there. I interact heavily on Instagram. So if you message me on Instagram, I might take a bit, but I'm always interactive on there. I chat with everyone that reaches out. I kind of think I'm not at the 20 million followers where I'm getting inundated like The Rock would, but I think it's important to interact with fans and people that are just interested in what's going on. And I try to interact with everybody. So if there's a place to message me, it's on Instagram, and I'll get back to you.
Nice. Well, Guy, man, I've had a wonderful time having you on. I can talk movies, and especially gangster movies, all day long. And this has been a lot of fun, man. I'm glad you could make it on.
Well, I appreciate you having me, man. Yeah, this was great. I could sit here. We could go for another 2 hours and keep talking.
Oh yeah. Easy. When you start running down and the movie that you were just talking about, it kind of sounds like a movie, and this one wasn't like I guess you would consider it a blockbuster, and a lot of people have never heard of it, even though it had a lot of famous people. But one of the main ones was Paul Walker. Do you remember a movie called Running Scared that he did?
Running Scared. Yeah, Running Scared.
That's kind of what I'm getting. Not necessarily the plot line, but the tone. Running Scared.
Dark, gritty, something along those lines. Yeah, something along those lines.
That was kind of what I had playing in the background in my mind when you were describing that movie.
For those that aren't familiar with Thief, that was James Caan and Michael Mann's first or second movie.
Wow. So quick little side story before we cut this off. Thief was set in Chicago, right?
Correct.
So I heard, I forgot what podcast because I listen to so much stuff. It all kind of blends together. I heard that Khan was actually hanging out with some mob guys and guys that specialized in breaking and entering. And he was actually going to go along on a break-in with some of these guys. And I guess the hotel he was staying at, some undercover officers had to go up to him. I guess they were wiretapping him.
Oh,
and
wow.
Not him, but they were wiretapping the people.
Yeah.
It was like, look, we know what you were thinking about doing. He's like, you don't need to do that because it could possibly lead to, you getting in trouble. He's like, I'd steer clear of that.
Wow, I gotta look that story up.
That was how deep he was in the character that he was going to actually go do. I mean, that's method acting at its finest.
That's a little too much for me, man. Like, if I gotta die, I'm not gonna take a bullet to the chest just to see what it feels like. I kind of know what that's like. Yeah, I don't need to do it, man. But that's crazy. I gotta look that story up.
Yeah, some of that stuff gets serious. Like Gianni Russo said that Khan really threw him a beating in that scene.
Beat his ass.
Yeah, he's like,
he didn't like him.
Into me. Yeah, he didn't.
They didn't like each other at all. Jimmy did not like. He did not like Russo. Did not like him at all. So when he was throwing those kicks, he was throwing them. They may not have been with fierce ill intentions, but there was intention behind it.
There was some not so good intentions in there for sure.
There was definitely a couple of pops he threw in there.
Yeah, he was like, we were doing that in one take. I wasn't going through that shit again.
I don't know if I want to piss off, Jimmy Khan back in the day. That was Brian Piccolo.
Yeah, pretty tough customer for sure. Rest in peace, Jimmy Khan.
Yeah, Jimmy.
I've had a blast having you on, man. Definitely invite you back later on down the line. Maybe after season 2 wraps, we can come in. You can tell some behind the scenes stuff that you probably can't reveal right now.
I would love to, man. Again, thank you for having me, man. This was fun.
Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Hollywood Wade. That was Guy Nardulli. Check out Tulsa King, September the 15th. We'll see you next time on Crime and Entertainment. Guy, we appreciate it, my friend.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you.